This video is on factoring by grouping. If a polynomial consists of 4 terms, it can often be factored by grouping. To factor by grouping, group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together with parentheses. Then factor a greatest common factor out of each binomial. If these GCFs are the same, then they can be factored out of each expression, resulting in the product of 2 binomials. Let's take a look at a couple examples here. So this says factor each polynomial by grouping, and we have 6xy plus 10y squared plus 9x plus 15y. Notice I have 4 terms, and I don't see a greatest common factor of all of those terms, so I am going to group the first 2 terms together with parentheses and the last 2 terms together with parentheses. Now I'm going to focus just on 6xy plus 10y squared and factor a greatest common factor out of that. And looking at that, I see that I can take a 2y out of each of those, and that's going to leave me with a 3x plus 5y. And if you're ever not sure if you factored a greatest common factor out correctly, go ahead and redistribute it and see if you get back where you started, which indeed I do. Okay? Now I'm going to look at my second set of parentheses here and look for a greatest common factor there. This has an x, this has a y, but both 9 and 15 can be divided by 3, so I will factor a 3 out, and that's going to leave me with 3x plus 5. And you know you're on the right track if the stuff in the parentheses is the same. So this whole thing right here is actually one term, and this whole thing here is another term. So out of this term, I can factor out a 3x plus 5y, and notice that can also be factored out of this term, leaving me with a 2y plus 3. And that's the original polynomial factored into 2 binomials. If you want to check, you would do as we did a couple videos ago and distribute this out and see that you get back to where you started from. Here's a second example. Here I have 10ac minus 15bc plus 8a minus 12b. So I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2 terms and parentheses around the last 2 terms. And let's take a greatest common factor out of the first set of parentheses here. I'm seeing that I could take out a 5 and a c, and that's going to leave me with 2a minus 3b. And out of my second set of parentheses, I can take out a positive 4, and that's going to leave me with 2a minus 3b. So I can see that I can factor a 2a minus 3b out of each of those terms. So my answer is going to be 2a minus 3b times 5c plus 4. So here's a couple examples I would like you to try. So if you would stop the video and do these 2 examples, these 2 practice problems in your math journal. Okay, let's take a look at these examples. So here I have 63x squared y minus 14x squared plus 9y minus 2. And I don't see a greatest common factor of all of those, so I'm going to go ahead and put parentheses around the first 2 and parentheses around the last 2. And out of the first set of parentheses, I can take out, looks like a 7x squared, and that's going to leave me with a 9y minus 2. Plus, and it doesn't look like it can factor, there isn't a greatest common factor of 9y minus 2, but I need to have something. I can actually, what I want to do here is actually factor out a 1, leaving me with 9y minus 2. So now this term and this term each have a common factor of 9y minus 2, and that leaves me with a 7x squared plus 1. Okay, let's take a look at example number 2 here. So I have 36x cubed plus 30x squared minus 54x minus 45. And looking at this, I do indeed have, I believe I have a greatest common factor of all of these, and it looks like it's going to be a 3. So I think I'm going to factor that 3 out, and that's going to leave me with 12x cubed plus 10x squared plus 18x minus 15. Okay. Oops, wait, I did that wrong. That should be a negative 18 in there. Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to have to just remember to put that 3 in my final answer. So I'm going to go ahead and group. You know what, I'm going to change these. Since I need to add parentheses, I'm going to change these to square brackets. So here are my first two terms. And then for my second two terms, I'm going to grab this negative and put a plus up here, because I want to think of that as a negative 18x. So I'm going to think of this instead of minus 18x, I'm going to think of it as plus a negative 18x. Now out of this first set of parentheses, I can factor out a 2x squared, and that's going to leave me with a 6x plus 5. Out of my second set of parentheses, I see I can factor out a 3, but let's go ahead and, since this starts with a negative, let's go ahead and factor out a negative 3. And that's going to leave me with 6x plus 5. And out of each of those, I can factor out a 6x plus 5. And then that leaves me with a 2x squared minus 3. And then don't forget about that 3 that we originally, greatest common factor of 3 that we originally factored out. So my final answer is 3 times the quantity 6x plus 5 times the quantity 2x squared minus 3. So in this video, we took a look at how to factor by grouping, a very useful technique when you have 4 terms in your polynomial.